Hello, welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshat Luthra. These are the top global headlines. US and European Union reveal more details of the trade deal framework. US Commerce Secretary says EU will eliminate tariffs on all US industrial goods and that European Union has pledged $600 billion in new investments in America. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar says India is looking to enhance exports to Russia after a bilateral summit in Moscow. Also adds that non-tariff barriers and regulatory impediments need to be swiftly addressed. Russia's Lavrov teases big announcements during President Putin's India visit later this year. Russia launches more than 500 drones and 40 missiles targeting Ukraine in the biggest bombardment in weeks. 1 person killed and 15 wounded in Ukraine's Kyiv. The attacks come even as US President Trump spearheads diplomatic moves to end the war. Let's now go to the big story that we are tracking today. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar meets Russian President Vladimir Putin during his Russia visit, a meeting that comes amidst US President Donald Trump's escalating tariff offensive against India for buying Russian oil. But this form of pressure has not affected India and Russia ties as they share a long-standing relationship which dates back to the Soviet era. Over the years, this relationship has grown in trade and investments, with trade growing from $1.4 billion in 1995 to $69 billion in FY25. India's trade with Russia is heavily skewed in Russia's favor, a concern which India has flagged on several occasions. India's exports to Russia are worth around $5 billion, while India's imports from Russia are close to $64 billion. This is largely because of India's oil purchase from Russia, which has seen a rise over the years. Other than oil, petroleum products, fertilizers, bituminous substances, mineral fuels, mineral waxes are among the top Indian imports from Russia. While India's export list is largely agri-products, chemical products, pharmaceuticals, iron and steel. By 2030, both nations expect their bilateral trade to hit $100 billion, a target which was reiterated by Jaishankar during his Russia visit as well. He stated India-Russia ties were the steadiest of the major relationships in the world after the Second World War. Complementing those thoughts, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the relationship is a special strategic partnership shaped by the two countries. Leaders other than trade, both leaders also discussed President Putin's India visit and the way both nations plan to prioritize their partnership in the backdrop of US pressure on India. Listen in.
The relations between India and Russia have been among the steadiest of the major relationships in the world after the Second World War. Enhancing Indian exports to Russia in sectors like pharmaceuticals, agriculture and textiles will certainly help to correct the current imbalance. Steps to ensure long-term supply of fertilizers was also taken up. Indian skilled workers, especially in IT, construction and engineering, can address the labor needs in Russia and deepen collaboration. Sustaining energy cooperation through trade and investments is also important.
On the whole, the economic foundation of our special and privileged strategic partnership developing incrementally and progressively, and it stresses the special nature of our relations. We are convinced that development of this strategic partnership is in the fundamental interests of our peoples and contributes to international and regional security and stability.
And joining me now to take this forward is Venu Rajamony, former Indian ambassador to the Netherlands. Ambassador Rajamony, thank you very much for joining us. How do you see this visit of External Affairs Minister Jaishankar to Russia, his meeting with Putin, his meeting with Lavrov, in light of the US-India tensions?
Clearly, it's an extremely important visit, as all visits of an Indian foreign minister to Moscow would be. The current geopolitical context, the tensions with the US clearly sharpens the discussions during the visit. But I think we must keep in mind what the foreign minister himself has said, that this has been one of the steadiest relationships since the Second World War. We have a long history of close cooperation with Russia. That close cooperation is reflected in the visit. It is not some kind of a panic reaction to what is happening between India and the US or any comments or statements made by President Trump and others in his cabinet. This is a long planned visit. We consider all visits to Moscow extremely important, or visits from Moscow extremely important. And the very purpose of the visit was to head the Intergovernmental Commission on Science, Technology, Economic Cooperation, Trade, Investment, etc. So a wide range of issues were discussed during the visit, which of course included whatever is the recent context.
You know, India and Russia have signed terms of reference for an India-Eurasia FTA. How significant is this?
Well, I think this is also very important and significant, and in a way, it is a signal. By imposing additional tariffs upon India, the US is threatening that it will drive Indian goods out of the US markets. We are sending a message that we have other options, we have other opportunities. There are other markets willing to welcome Indian goods. This India-Eurasian FTA will certainly take a step forward in facilitating access of Indian goods into Eurasian markets. But at the same time, we are realistic that those may not be the most important of markets, but still, it is a symbolic gesture which sends a strong message to the US.
All right. I would also like to ask you, are Russia and India likely to forge even closer ties now in light of the US tensions? Or would there have been a message from Jaishankar to the Russian foreign minister that some adjustments in the relationship, some adjustments in crude oil purchases will be necessary in light of what's happening with the US?
Well, I at least from whatever is available publicly, whatever information is available publicly, what I see is a reiteration of the message both to Russia, to US and all key partners that India will remain completely focused on its own national interest. It will pursue what is important to it without being swayed by what a third country says or does. If you look at this visit closely, as I already have said, this was not a panic reaction to whatever is happening in India-US relations. This is something already planned, and Foreign Minister Jaishankar has reiterated how this is one of the steadiest relationships. Secondly, he has also said that the main drivers of this relationship is geopolitical convergence, close contacts between the leaders over long years, and popular sentiment. So these are all things which are constant and will stay. But within this context, India has also conveyed a strong message to Russia, not that it will reduce oil imports, but that the trade should be more balanced, that Russia should import more goods from India, and that the trade balance has become extremely skewed in Russia's favor because of the oil imports. So rather than send a message that we are going to reduce our oil imports, what we are telling Russia is, come closer to us. Import more Indian goods. Let's make the trade balanced. A similar message was also given by the foreign minister in his address to the India-Russia Business Forum, where he welcomed Russian industry to come to India, to invest in India, to forge partnerships with Indian industry and take the economic relationship forward.
Okay, if you had to sum up the priorities for the visit of President Putin to India and what Prime Minister Modi and Putin may discuss, what would those be, sir, briefly?
I would say it was that India-Russians are as strong as ever, will continue to grow, and we will explore every opportunity possible to strengthen this relationship. We are not going to be deterred. We are not going to be cowed down by threats from the US. We will pursue what we think is our national interest, and we will move ahead in continuing to build a close partnership with Russia, which covers all aspects. I spoke earlier about trade, I spoke about investment, but also we have a very strong defense cooperation. And Russia has been one of the biggest backers of India's Make in India program. even transferring extremely high-end defense technology to India. We know the BrahMos missile is jointly manufactured by Russia and India. So India and Russia will continue to seek areas of convergence, areas of cooperation which benefit both. I am under no circumstances saying that India-US relations are not important or that Russia-India relations will replace India-US relations, but India will remain focused on its national interest. It is not going to sacrifice its Russia relationship because of what President Trump has said or what US has done. But at the same time, it will continue to try to manage the US relationship and bring it back to a level of normalcy from the abnormal situation into which it has slipped.
All right, time for a short break, but stay with us. Trump's 50% tariffs on India kick in within a week. What will this mean for Indian businesses? We'll discuss that with former Commerce Secretary Rajeev Kher on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens. As India-US ties deteriorate, President Donald Trump's 50% tariffs on Indian goods will take effect from August 27th. The move includes a 25% penalty specifically targeted at India's purchase of Russian oil, taking the total duty to 50% on most imports from India, with only a small exemption list. India criticized this move, calling it unfair and unreasonable. It also pointed out that other major economies, including EU, China and the US itself, continue to import Russian commodities. A planned US delegation visit to Delhi for trade talks on August 25th has been cancelled. This would have been the 6th round of negotiations, considered crucial after 5 rounds failed to produce a deal. Despite US pressure, India has kept buying Russian oil, even as it looks up to ramp up imports from the US as well. In a question regarding the impact of US's 50% tariffs, Union Minister of State for Commerce and Industry Jitin Prasada said an estimated $48.2 billion worth of India's exports will now be subject to the new tariffs. Joining me now to discuss this further is Rajeev Kher, former Commerce Secretary. Mr. Kher, thank you very much for joining us. Does the prospect of 50% tariff become very real now?
Well, from all indications, it looks quite real. And the way the delegation visit has been called off from US, I think it strengthens the whole argument. It looks very possible, and the day is not very far. 27th August is the day.
How do you expect India's trade with the US and our economy to be impacted overall?
Yes, Parikshit. See, you cannot look at this issue as simply a trade issue, because as far as India's exports are concerned, the figures are out and we know the implication. But I think this is a much larger issue which covers not simply India's exports and imports from US, but also investments, because it creates a certain amount of gloom over the bilateral economic climate, and therefore the issue of investments and a variety of non-trade issues which may come up over time. And we have also seen that there is a significant amount of political cloud over this issue. And it's really hard to say whether it's an economic issue or it's turning out to be a geopolitical issue. In my opinion, it's now turning out to be a geopolitical issue. So I see a significant possibility of impact. It can also trigger a chain, God forbid, but as we know, we are principal beneficiaries of H-1B visas and several other areas of US-India economic cooperation. And therefore, we have to navigate this whole process extremely astutely and with a lot of panache.
Right. Can the situation be retrieved from here onwards? Can we still somehow get a deal with the United States? And what will it take to achieve that?
See, there have been US deals now with Japan, Korea, UK, Vietnam, Indonesia. And if you draw examples from them, then I think a deal is still possible. Many of those announcements which have been made by these countries, one really doesn't know whether each of them would be in a position to fulfill all of those announcements. The kind of investment-related announcements which have been made by Japan, EU, UK, and even Vietnam, and the kind of a blanket tariff reduction that Vietnam and Indonesia have done, it is very likely that all of these promises will not be fulfilled. And please remember that we still don't know what is the character of these agreements, how far legally binding they can be or they are. And therefore, it appears that it is essentially too much of, there is substance in it, of course, but there is a lot of cosmetics around it. So I do see a possibility of a trade deal coming through. We need to recognize the political environment in the US and the kind of signals which are coming out and navigate accordingly.
Right. Do you feel that India could have done a few things better? Would there be some lessons from the negotiations over the last few weeks? Because it is being said now that the fact that we've not had a deal and the US is imposing a 50% tariff, it's no longer about trade. It's not even about Russian oil.
Well, I think, Parikshit, to begin with, I think we overestimated the proximity with the new dispensation, and no more new, but the present dispensation in Washington. We thought that it would be an easy walk, possibly. But as it has turned out, it's not simply transactional, but it has a deep underpinning of a very long thought out strategy. Which way this strategy is going, I really don't know at the moment. But in my view, I think we could have navigated a little more cautiously. See, a trade agreement with US has never been an easy affair. It is not as if we are talking to US about a free trade agreement only now. This has been happening for the last 10, 15 years. And every time we have failed, we have not been able to cross the threshold. So we knew what kinds of demands would be coming. We knew that genetically modified organisms or agricultural or dairy-related issues or automobile tariffs, etc., they will come into play. And therefore, we needed to move a little more cautiously. Actually, nothing has come out in the open about the status of negotiations, and therefore it is hard to comment upon them. But I do feel that we needed to recognize that it was not an easy affair to have a FTA with US, and therefore the sort of a perception that was given out that we would be in a position to negotiate a deal, I think could have been a little more balanced.
Right. At this juncture, how do you think India should now manage its other trading relationships? There have been some reports that India may consider joining the RCEP. Would you consider that India should revisit some of these pacts? We were against joining the RCEP earlier, but is it time to take a relook at things?
Absolutely. See, we need to recognize, Parikshit, that we need to expand our market. Now, US has been traditionally a preferred Indian destination, and much of the industry that exports to US has got so used to exporting to US and accepted the variety of facilitative environment that US offers, and the fact that lots of Indian exporters feel very comfortable exporting to US, I think the industry hasn't made enough effort to diversify. So my first suggestion is that Indian industry must seriously think about diversifying. And it is not something which can be done overnight. It's something which will take a longer time. We have wasted a lot of time in not having diversified so far. Secondly, we need to look at our positions on CPTPP and RCEP. There is a lot which I have said in the past on RCEP. CPTPP now without US is possibly something that we can think about. I think we need to look at them very seriously. because it's not simply a question of the kind of apprehensions that have been expressed in the context of RCEP vis-a-vis China. See, this is the only institutional mechanism where you have China inside the decision-making process, which can be influenced by you. And therefore, it makes immense sense to me that RCEP needs to be, in a sense, from an Indian perspective, renegotiated. Whatever are our apprehensions, we could take them, and we could now, in the new context, strike a balance with China. Same needs to happen with CPTPP. Besides, we haven't explored newer markets. Africa remains in a stagnant condition. There is growth, but we have not been expanding the way we should have. Our review of ASEAN agreements is still on the burner, but hasn't really moved forward. And we need to very significantly and with a lot of depth need to look at our relationship, trade and economic relationship with China, particularly investments coming from China. This blanket sort of a ban on Chinese investment, I think, is going to hurt us, because now with bilateral trade with US suffering, there's bound to be an impact on the investments coming from US. And therefore, we need to look at the fact that we need investments for our growth vision. And therefore, we need to take a completely de novo sort of a look at all of these, besides, of course, developing domestic markets.
Right. Those are some very important points. Now, let me just ask you about RCEP specifically. We had major reservations earlier, but do you feel that now in the current context, we should join the RCEP as it is, not seek for any India-specific concessions?
No, I won't say we should join it as it is, because we had apprehensions. Some of them were genuine. I think there is a thawing of India-China economic relationship. We hope things will work out to the extent that it will require huge amount of effort on both sides. I think we need to have a very clear understanding with China in this area, and then need to bring in our perspective to ourselves. I think it will make a lot of sense for all other members who are already part of the RCEP to have India there. It's a huge market. And as a matter of fact, if you recall, when RCEP was finalized and signed by others, they did wait for us for about a year to let India join in if there is an afterthought. So it is not as if they would not be interested in joining RCEP, in India joining RCEP. But I think we cannot join it as it is. We need to work around a few issues. We had a lot of apprehensions on surges. We had apprehensions on dispute processes, and we need to deal with them.
Right. You spoke about having a closer trading relationship with China. We've seen some amount of positive messaging between India and China after the visit of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. Both sides have decided to resume flights, resume tourist, business visas, media visas, other kind of visas. Border trade through 3 checkpoints is to be resumed. The Indian government has said, and this is coming from high-level sources, that China is lifting restrictions on high rare earth magnets, tunnel boring machines, and also fertilizers. Very important messages, all of them. How much of this can we really believe for the long term? And when you say there should not be any apprehension, or we should drop some of those apprehensions, suspicions about the partnership, what would those be? What would you be alluding to? Are you talking about Press Note 3?
I am talking about Press Note 3, yes, but I am also talking about the fact that, listen, today it is not as if India alone is suffering because of what is happening from the US. Every country, every trading partner is under a stress. It will be lesser or more than us. In fact, if you talk of tariff, then we are under the maximum stress, India and Brazil. But China is under a stress. And secondly, you don't know when this stress will increase or decrease, because there is so much of volatility in the way American politics is unfurling itself that even China would not be sure about how it is likely to face the American mercurial policy environment. And therefore, even China would like to open newer markets for it or to strengthen or straighten those markets which have gone into some sort of complexities. So it is not as if China would not be interested. It is not as if others would not be interested in India coming into the whole equation. And yes, press note 3, I did say, and I strongly believe that we cannot color all kinds of investments which come from China, which could come from China. And we need to, of course, we can go case by case, but we need to look at what are those investments which can help us, particularly in the areas of technology and newer sectors, because that is where I think the big question will come, whether we have access to technology in the context of what is happening bilaterally with the US. Will we have a continued access to those technologies? Because unfortunately, with this whole tariff paradigm, everything else which mattered in terms of bilateral relationship with India has been put on hold. And we don't know the signals that we are getting. We don't know whether we will be in a position to continue with the same perspectives as had evolved over the years in several other earlier presidencies, that India and US were developing a relationship which was a long-lasting and a strategically very important relationship. So we need to look at every opportunity for diversification and building new relationships.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Kher, for joining us and giving us an overview of where we stand with our trading relationship with the US and how critical it is for India to reconsider its position on RCEP and also China as well. Let's move on now and take a look at some of the trending stories of the day. Chinese President Xi Jinping made a rare visit to Tibet to mark the 60th anniversary of consolidating China control over the Himalayan region. He called for building a modern socialist Tibet that is united and prosperous. As per Chinese media, he met around 20,000 officials and locals in the region. Sony's PlayStation is set to become costlier by an extra $50. Sony said all three PlayStations consoles will see a similar price hike. The most expensive PS5 Pro version is expected to cost under $750 after this hike. The Japanese company's decision comes amid slowdown in the video game market and fear of impact of US tariffs. McDonald's is slashing prices in the US as consumers cut back on spending. This according to the Wall Street Journal. The fast food giant will discount 8 popular combo meals by 15%. The move, backed by financial support for franchisees, aims to lure back cost-conscious diners. Ethel Caterham, the world's oldest living person, celebrated her 116th birthday, born on August 21st, 1909 in Shipton, Bellingham, Hampshire. Caterham is the last surviving subject of Edward VII, who died on 6th of May 1910. She was born 5 years before the start of the First World War, the second youngest of 8 siblings. Caterham became the oldest living person in April after the death of sister Ina Canavaro Lucas, a Brazilian nun, at 116. US celebrity judge Frank Caprio, known as the nicest judge in the world, died at 88. His popularity soared following his TV show Cotton Providence, where he compassionately and humorously gave rulings that went viral, garnering billions of views. Caprio passed away after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Global Lens. More news and updates on the other side.